Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 69, Conclusions, Part 2. The court of the Archon Basilius dealt with offences against the gods, and these offences against the gods were considered anosia, unholy. The court would consider whether an offence had been committed, and if it had been, what the punishment should be, and most importantly, any miasma which had come about would be removed by the very fact that there had been a trial. Aeschylus, in his great trilogy, the Oresteia, shows how the court system was set up to prevent further vengeance killings, with the goddesses of vengeance, the Erinues, being incorporated into the court itself. They sanctioned whatever the outcome of the trial happened to be. For this system to work, the court must accept certain premises, that there are gods, that the gods give humans all the good things, that if the gods become angry, the gods stop giving these good things. This is manifested in miasma, pollution, which will gradually spread so long as nothing is done about this offense to the gods. But once the trial has happened, the gods are no longer offended, and they once more favor the person, the family, the district, or the entire polis, depending how far the pollution had spread. This position sounds remarkably like the one held by Euthyphro, and we can't help thinking that perhaps Euthyphro represents the court of the Archon Basilius. Plato goes out of his way to show just how extreme Euthyphro is. The other citizens in Athens laugh at him for believing everything about Greek mythology. He actually knows everything about Greek mythology, and he also acts on Greek mythology, just as the court of the Archon Basilius has to do. His family are upset with him. Even his father, and we know that his father also believed in miasma, but he, the father, sent to Athens to find out what to do about the murder of his household serf by Euthyphro's serf. The father specifically didn't do anything to the murderer. He kept him tied up in a ditch. He didn't feed him because that would have contaminated the family. And yet Euthyphro is so certain about his own knowledge of the holy and the unholy that he can even prosecute his own father, something unthinkable to most Greeks. The court concentrates not on the holy, but on the unholy, to anosion, and Euthyphro does the same. He has an unhealthy fear of the gods. He's actually proud of all the terrible stories he knows in Greek mythology, and it seems that even his worship is designed to prevent the gods from being angry. He does recognize that the gods provide humans with all good things, but he holds the traditional view that the gods are also irrational, temperamental forces of nature. And actually, a lot of them were originally. We should note that the whole conversation about the holy was initiated by Socrates. Euthyphro himself is concentrating all the time on the unholy, which is also what the court of the Archon Basilius concentrates on, obviously because it's a court of law, and a court of law concentrates on crimes. When Euthyphro answers Socrates' question about the holy by suggesting that it is what the gods love, he may have been calculating that it must be the opposite of the unholy, which is clearly what the gods don't like. His second major answer, that it's to do with therapia of the gods, also reflects his fear of the gods. He worships the gods in order to avert their anger. Let's have a look now at Socrates. Does he also represent something in the court of the Archon Basileus? It's true that Socrates has a trial in the court of the Archon Basileus, but he is being prosecuted by Meletus. We might say that Socrates is an effect of the court, while Euthyphro represents the essence of the court. We might think then that Socrates is connected with the court of the Archon Basileus just because we need to see this other sort of trial. While Euthyphro's trial is to do with murder, Socrates' trial is to do with straight-out offence against the gods, with nothing to do with murder. It isn't an injustice, whatever it is Socrates is doing, but it's supposed to be an offence, something that they don't like. What he's accused of is inventing new gods, or believing in new gods, not the gods of the city, and corrupting the youth, as if that is something which would offend the gods. Some young aristocrats had in the past desecrated some statues, and Socrates was known to have talked with them at some point, and that was enough to accuse him of corrupting the youth. As for believing in new gods, Euthyphro himself points us in the right direction. Socrates believed that he had a daimonion, a divine power, which looked after him. In Plato's dialogues, this power prevented Socrates from doing things which would be detrimental, but in Xenophon's dialogues, this daimonion can predict the future. Whatever the case may be, would the gods find this particularly offensive? It seems very unlikely. There was a time when everybody believed in a personal power called a daimon, which looked after the person, the individual, and if the person looked after the body, the daimon would also look after the body, and it would then be a good daimon, and in other words, a eudaimon, and the person would live a reasonably successful life. If the person neglected the body, the daimon would become bad, in other words, a kakodaimon, and the person's life would become disorganized, to say the least. The good life, the successful life, was called eudaimonia, and this became the aim of philosophy as well. The name eudaimonia was no longer taken literally. It just meant a good life. It's rather badly translated as happiness. If Socrates' daimonion is anything to do with the ancient daimon, then he should be seen as more in touch with religious roots than most of the Athenian citizens. Euthyphro regards himself as similar to Socrates in that they are both mocked for their religious practices, but they are completely different. Socrates has his daimonion. Euthyphro doesn't have a daimonion. He simply has knowledge of mythology, and he thinks that he is entitled to act upon his knowledge of mythology. This again is like the court of the Archon Basileus itself. we may conclude that if the cult of the Archon Basileus were to be made manifest as a person, that person would be Euthyphro. Both Euthyphro and the cult of the Archon Basileus represent state religion. The cult of the Archon Basileus is respected. People actually go there to conduct trials, and people are judges there. But when the cult is made manifest as a person, it's easier to see how ridiculous the whole concept is, because Euthyphro himself is ridiculous. As stated by Euthyphro himself, the other citizens think he's mad when he applies his knowledge of Greek mythology to state business, or when he prosecutes his father. That's simply being disrespectful. If there is anything in Athens which represents holiness, it must be the cult of the Archon Basileus, which Euthyphro helps us to see is anosion, unholy, because it disrespects the gods and it commits injustice against Socrates, who has done absolutely nothing wrong, and against Euthyphro's father, who did what he did in accordance with state religion. If the cult of the Archon Basileus is actually not so holy as it appears to be, it's actually unholy, is there anything which is actually holy, even if it appears unholy? Well, obviously, that is Socrates. He's tried for asabeia, for disrespect, and he is found guilty, which means that he is considered anosios. Plato has made Socrates the extreme character representing the hosios, so he represents the holy which appears unholy. He respects the gods, he acknowledges that they give us all of the good things, but he cannot see how they could do the terrible things that Euthyphro attributes to them through Greek mythology. And Socrates himself is actually a good person. He is trying to make Euthyphro better. He's trying to show Euthyphro, or make Euthyphro realize for himself, that he is misguided in his approach to the holy. Euthyphro and Socrates are both extreme characters, which indicates that they are degmata of paradigmata, paradigms. And paradigms are minimalist, concrete representations of aspects of an idea. So next time we'll put everything together and find out what the dialogue is all about.